I think it's worth picking up it'll give you a great idea of some of the contentious early history of the 20th century and how Youngstown was really kind of floating at the heart of a lot of it.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
I like a bank that's a pillar in my community.
I like a bank so cutting edge, they have a lab branch.
We are so alike.
Well, we do both bank at Farmers National Bank.
Farmers.
Stand strong.
So I had done a lot of freelance work. I had been doing some writing for an old blog called Rustwire, and people at History Press had got a hold of me and actually invited me to write what became my first book, which was Lost Youngstown. And almost immediately I had a lot of research that I didn't use, and I rolled that over into a second book, Historic Theaters of Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley. And that was really supposed to be it. When the pandemic started, I wrote an article for the Metro Monthly about the Spanish flu, because obviously we're gone to lockdown. It became apparent to me that this was going to be a very serious thing. It was probably going to last quite a while. So I wrote that piece, and I had some other pieces I was working on, and I talked to my editor, and we just decided to do a book. So I rewrote and expanded the Spanish flu piece, and then I brought in a whole bunch of others, and that was kind of the genesis of Hidden History of Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley. A lot of this book, probably at least 5 chapters, and parts of other chapters revolve around the era from about 1910 to 1920 and some of the 1930s. So there's a cultural historian by the name of Peter Turgeon who calls 1910 to 1920 the violent 1910s. And I really revisit some of that history. So the East Youngstown strike of 1916, which burned down a good portion of the business district of what is today Camel. The Great Steel Strike of 1919. I kind of fit the story of Youngstown during that strike into the story of the national strike. So 1919 was one of the biggest strike waves in American history. There was like 237 strikes in Ohio, including the Great Steel Strike. Youngstown was at the center of it. Very bloody, very contentious strike. And also during the same time period, I talk about the building of what people call today the Youngstown Sheet and Tube Worker Homes, which is one of the earliest examples of precast concrete homes being built for workers really in the whole world. People would recognize probably I have a chapter on Route 66, which was the most popular television show on in the early 1960s. And it was one of the very few shows of its time where they would go around and shoot the show in different cities all over the place. It was called Route 66, but it was almost never filmed on Route 66. But in 1961, they shot a whole bunch of episodes in Ohio, Cleveland, also here in Youngstown, right in downtown Youngstown, and in Kinsman. And I talk all about the history of that, how the show fit into pop culture in the time, why they filmed in Youngstown, and some of the places that they filmed at, almost all of which are gone today. I think it's worth picking up it'll give you a great idea of some of the contentious early history of the 20th century and how Youngstown was really kind of floating at the heart of a lot of it. And there's a lot of parallels between what we're going on now. Increasing strikes, the Great Resignation, labor problems, that's visited here in the book. Of course, the Spanish flu pandemic, we're right back there. Even there's some civil rights history in here as well. So when you think about Black Lives Matter, we have some things that are reflected in that in this book with the history of the Green Book and civil rights era history here in Youngstown in the 50s and 60s.
BusinessJournalDaily.com 3 Minutes With is brought to you by Farmers National Bank.
I like a bank that's a pillar in my community.
I like a bank so cutting edge, they have a lab branch.
We are so alike.
Well, we do both bank at Farmers National Bank.
Farmers.
Stand strong.